The wind howled across the plains like a living thing, tearing at the brittle grass and scattering dust into the darkening sky. On that endless frontier, where the sun bled itself into red horizons, rumors traveled faster than horse hooves. And one name rode on every whisper: Ezekiel Whitlock. A man of land and cattle, rich enough to crush a small town with the flick of his pen, cruel enough that no hand lasted long in his service. His ranch was spoken of in warnings, not invitations. Clara Bennett heard those warnings and walked straight into them. Her boots were cracked, her shawl frayed by weeks of wind and rain. She carried little more than a canvas bag, and the ache of loss heavy in her chest. The fire that had taken her husband and their home had left nothing but ashes and the hollow memory of laughter that once filled their cabin. The townsfolk pitied her with their eyes, but turned away when she asked for work. A woman alone, without family, was a burden in a place where survival left no room for mercy. So when word came of a job no one dared keep, tending the cruel cowboy's ranch, Clara chose it without hesitation. Not out of courage, but because hunger left no choice. The ranch sprawled before her, a scar carved into the land. Fences stretched in every direction, pastures dotted with restless cattle. Men moved like shadows, their faces hard from sun and suspicion. And at the heart of it all stood Ezekiel Whitlock, tall in his saddle, his black coat snapping in the wind like a crow's wing. His gaze cut to Clara as though he were measuring her worth and finding it lacking. "You're the new one." His voice rasped like sand dragged across stone. "Yes, sir." Her own voice surprised her, steady, though her stomach twisted. He studied her, then spat into the dirt. "Women break faster than green colts. You last a week, I'll be impressed." The men around him smirked, waiting for her to flinch. Clara only adjusted her grip on the bag slung over her shoulder. Whitlock's lips curled into something between a sneer and a challenge. "Prove you're worth my feed," he said, jerking his head toward the corral. Inside, a horse bucked against the rails, its eyes wild, nostrils flaring clouds into the cold air. "Get that beast under control, or walk back to whatever hole you crawled out of." The men chuckled. Clara set her bag down. Fear clawed at her ribs, but she remembered her husband's voice, steady Clara. Animals can smell doubt. She climbed the fence and dropped into the dust. The horse lunged, teeth bared. The onlookers jeered. But Clara's steps were calm, measured. She spoke low, steady words no one else could hear, her hands open, her body angled so she did not threaten. Minutes stretched like hours. Sweat slicked her palms. The horse shied, reared, struck the ground hard enough to shake the fence. She stood her ground, whispering still. Slowly, impossibly, the animal's frenzy ebbed. Its ears flicked forward. Its breathing steadied. When Clara reached a hand to its mane, it did not bolt. She stroked gently, and for a heartbeat, silence fell over the corral. When she climbed back over the fence, dust clinging to her skirts, Whitlock's expression had not softened. But something flickered in his eyes, reluctant acknowledgement, the kind he gave to a storm that refused to break. "You'll do," he muttered. Her quarters were little more than a bunk in a drafty shack where the walls leaned as if tired of standing. Supper was a tin plate of beans shoved her way, eaten under the watch of ranch hands who muttered about the widow, as though she were deaf. She kept her head down, but her mind was alive with the weight of the day. The horse's wild eyes still burned in her memory. So did Whitlock's. That night, when the sky split with wolves' howls and the fire in the lantern guttered low, Clara couldn't sleep. The thin mattress scratched. The wind clawed at the shutters. She pressed her palms together, whispering the prayers she had almost forgotten, until she felt the hair at the back of her neck rise. Something or someone watched her. She slipped from her bunk and peered through the cracks in the wall. Beyond the fence line, under the skeletal outline of a cottonwood tree, stood a figure. Still silent, half swallowed by the dark. She couldn't make out his face, but she knew he was no ranch hand. His posture was different, proud, wary. His presence felt less like a threat and more like a warning, though she could not explain why. When she blinked, he was gone. Clara lay back down, her heart thundering in her chest. She stared at the low rafters, listening to the wolves, to the restless cattle, to her own breathing. She had chosen this place out of desperation. And yet, even as fear gnawed at her, some part of her burned with defiance. Whatever test Ezekiel Whitlock thought he had set for her, she would endure it. But as sleep finally dragged her under, the image of that silent figure at the tree line lingered. And deep down, Clara knew, her true trials had not yet begun. The storm came without warning. At dawn the air was heavy, the sky low and brooding, but by mid-morning the heavens split. Rain fell in sheets, the wind tearing through the valley with a force that bent fence posts and rattled the very bones of the ranch. Men shouted over the roar, scrambling to tie down feed wagons and drive the cattle from low ground before the river swelled. Clara was among them. Her skirts clung to her legs, mud sucking at her boots as she fought to keep pace with the ranch hands who cursed her presence as if she were the cause of the storm itself. A gate burst open, and half a dozen horses bolted into the open fields. Their hooves thundered, their eyes wide with panic. The men scattered, each chasing in vain, but Clara did not stop to think. She lunged for a bridle strap whipping loose in wind, caught it, and was nearly dragged off her feet. The animal screamed, pulling against her, its muscles like coiled steel. Clara's arms burned, her body thrown into the mud again and again, but she held. She whispered, not words this time but a rhythm, a breath to steady them both. When at last the horse slowed, trembling, its chest heaving, she looped the strap around a fence post and collapsed against it. No one praised her. The men rode on, whooping as they chased the others. She rose, spitting mud, and caught sight of the river. It was rising fast, churning brown and violent, already swallowing the banks. Another horse stumbled into it, swept away before it could fight the current. Without thought, Clara charged, her boots slipping, her breath tearing at her lungs. She reached the edge, grabbed for the reins flashing in the froth, and was dragged under. Cold swallowed her whole. The current battered her, filled her ears with thunder. She clawed for the surface, lungs screaming, and saw the horses, eye wide with the same fear she felt. Her grip loosened. Darkness pressed in until a hand seized her arm. She broke the surface coughing, water pouring from her nose and mouth. The horse was gone, but she was alive, pulled toward the bank with a strength not her own. Gasping, half-blind, she looked up through the rain. The man who saved her was not one of Whitlock's crew. His hair was braided against his neck, his chest bare beneath a soaked hide vest. His eyes, dark as storm clouds, studied her with no trace of pity. He did not speak. Before she could, he was gone, vanishing into the trees as though the storm had swallowed him whole. Clara staggered back to the ranch sodden and shivering. The others barely noticed her return. Whitlock, dry beneath the porch roof, looked down at her as if she were a stray mutt that had found its way home. "Next time," he said coldly, "save the horse, not yourself." That night, Clara's body ached from bruises, her mind replaying the moment she'd nearly drowned. She lay awake listening to the rain on the roof, remembering the silent strength of the man who had pulled her from death. Who was he? Why had he watched her before, and why did he choose to save her now? The following days were no kinder. The men took every chance to remind her she was unwanted. Tools went missing when it was her turn to mend fence. Buckets split when she carried water. They muttered sharp jokes just within earshot, laughing as though her dignity were sport. One night, when she lingered in the barn too long, one of the hands cornered her between the stalls. His breath reeked of whiskey, his eyes gleamed with mean intent. "You don't belong here," he slurred, pressing a hand against the wall beside her head. "But maybe you can earn your keep another way." Clara's pulse hammered, fear and fury twisting together. She shoved him back with every ounce of strength she had, caught a pitchfork leaning against the stall, and leveled it at his chest. "Touch me again," she said, voice sharp as broken glass, "and you'll bleed for it." The man sneered but retreated, muttering curses. By morning, the story spread across the ranch. Whitlock summoned her, his expression unreadable. "A hand says you threatened him," he said. "With my tools." "He tried to," she began, but he cut her off. "I don't care what he tried. My men are worth more than some desperate widow. Step out of line again, you'll be gone." The injustice burned like acid, yet Clara swallowed it. There was nowhere else to go, nothing but hunger waiting beyond the ranch's fences. That night, alone in her shack, grief returned like an old wound torn open. She thought of her husband's hands, warm and steady, and how they would never hold hers again. She thought of the cabin lost to flames, the laughter silenced forever. For the first time since arriving, she wept openly, her body shaking with the weight of it. When the sobs ebbed, she noticed something at the door. A bundle wrapped in cloth. She opened it to find dried venison, herbs for bruises, and a carved bead threaded on leather. Simple but deliberate. A gift left in silence. Her heart quickened. She stepped outside, scanning the dark. At the edge of the trees, the figure stood again. The warrior, watching. He did not move, did not speak. Slowly, Clara placed the bead over her neck, then set a piece of bread on the ground between them. A gesture returned for a gesture given. The man inclined his head once, barely a shadow of acknowledgement, then melted back into the forest. Clara held the bead tightly as she returned inside. For the first time since she set foot on Whitlock's land, she felt less alone. The cruelty of the ranch had not broken her. Something out there, someone, saw her worth, even if no one else did. And though she did not yet know his name, she knew this much: he would return. Morning broke with a brittle silence, the kind that came after days of storm. The land gleamed, cleansed yet scarred, rivers swollen, fences scattered in splinters across the fields. Clara moved through the wreckage with sore muscles and blistered palms, patching what she could. The bead around her neck swung with each step, hidden beneath her blouse, a small reminder that someone out there watched over her in ways Whitlock never would. It was near dusk when she saw him again. The warrior emerged from the tree line, no longer content to linger at a distance. His presence carried a weight that pressed against the air itself. He approached with measured steps, his eyes sharp but not hostile. Clara froze at the water trough, unsure whether to speak or flee. When he stopped a few paces away, he pointed at her bandaged arm, the one wrenched nearly from its socket when she had fought the river. Then, without a word, he crouched, crushing herbs between his palms, mixing them with water, and motioned for her to sit. She hesitated, but something in his gaze, steady, unyielding, not cruel, dissolved her doubt. She lowered herself onto the trough's edge. His touch was firm, yet careful, as he bound the mixture to her skin. She winced at the sting. "Tahu," he said at last, his voice low, resonant, as if shaped by stone and wind. She realized it was his name. She pressed a hand to her chest. "Clara." The exchange was brief, but it carried the weight of an oath. Names mattered. They rooted strangers to each other. From that day, their paths crossed more often. Tahu appeared in silence, offering small acts of aid, repairing a broken fence post before dawn, leaving herbs to soothe her bruises, teaching her with simple gestures how to read the sky for storms. She responded in kind, leaving bread or mended cloth where she knew he would find them. Words remained scarce, but trust grew in their absence. The ranch itself, however, grew more dangerous. Whitlock's greed was as endless as the horizon. He pressed his men harder, driving cattle across swollen streams, cutting into neighboring grazing land with no regard for treaties or warnings. One evening, riders returned breathless with news. A band of raiders planned to strike the ranch by nightfall, drawn by Whitlock's arrogance and wealth. Panic rippled through the hands. Some cursed Whitlock for bringing this upon them. Others loaded rifles with grim obedience. Clara stood among them, clutching a weapon heavier than she had ever carried. She could feel the tremor in her hands, the thrum of her heart. The raid came swift and brutal. Shadows poured from the darkness, gunfire cracking through the night like lightning. Horses screamed, cattle scattered. Flames licked at the hay stores as raiders set fire to the barns. Clara ducked behind a water trough as bullets chewed into the dirt around her. She might have died there, paralyzed by fear, had Tahu not appeared at her side. He thrust a revolver into her hands, his own rifle steady, his face unflinching. They moved together, unspoken rhythm guiding them, he covering her advance, she firing when he signaled, their survival balanced on trust. A rider charged, swinging a blade. Clara's shot rang out wild, missing its mark, but Tahu's arrow struck true, the raider falling hard into the dust. Adrenaline roared through her, banishing hesitation. She reloaded, fired again, the weight of the weapon becoming an extension of her will. For the first time since the fire that claimed her husband, she felt not like a victim, but like someone capable of shaping her own fate. The chaos stretched for what felt like hours, though the night was only half spent. By the time the raiders fled into the hills, leaving bodies in their wake, Clara was covered in ash and sweat, her ears ringing from the din. She turned to Tahu. He gave a single nod, solemn, as if to say she had proven herself. Whitlock surveyed the wreckage with fury, barking orders at men too weary to argue. His gaze fell on Clara, and though he offered no praise, something in his expression shifted. Resentment still etched his features, but beneath it lurked reluctant recognition. She had stood her ground where many had faltered. Later, in the stillness after the flames were beaten down, Clara sat alone, the revolver heavy in her lap. She stared at her reflection in the steel barrel, seeing not the widow who had stumbled onto this ranch, but someone altered by fire and blood. Stronger, perhaps. More alive. The bead around her neck felt warm against her skin, as if sharing in that truth. Tahu found her there. He crouched by the embers, drawing shapes in the dirt with a charred stick. Waves, fences, a circle of fire. Then he sketched a line of riders, arrows striking them down. Clara understood his warning even without words. Whitlock's defiance would invite more raids. This night had been only the beginning. Her breath caught. She thought of the men who would die, of the land torn apart by Whitlock's hunger, of her own place caught between. She wanted to believe she could endure it, that survival was enough. Yet a voice deep inside whispered that endurance alone was not living. She met Tahu's gaze. In his eyes, she saw not just warning, but expectation. The land would demand choices soon. Hard ones. The fire crackled low, casting their shadows long against the broken fence. Clara drew the revolver close, her fingers tightening around the grip. For the first time since she had set foot on Whitlock's ranch, she did not tremble at what lay ahead. She felt the weight of change pressing in, inevitable as dawn. And though she could not yet name it, she knew this. Her story here was building towards something greater, something that would test not only her strength, but the very core of who she had become. The air on the ranch grew tense in the days after the raid, brittle as glass ready to shatter. Men spoke in low voices, casting wary glances at Whitlock. His fury had not cooled. Instead, it sharpened into something colder, more dangerous. He spoke of expansion, of driving cattle onto lands not his, of breaking treaties that had held uneasy peace for decades. To him, the raid was not warning enough, it was provocation, and he would answer it with conquest. Clara listened in silence, her stomach knotting with every word. She thought of Tahu's drawings in the dirt, the circle of fire and riders cut down. She knew now what he had meant. Whitlock's greed would bring ruin, not only to the ranch, but to the land itself. One evening, Whitlock summoned her. His boots struck the porch boards with the certainty of a man who had never been denied. "You'll ride with us tomorrow," he said. "We're taking cattle east. New ground, better grass. I want every hand with me." Clara's throat tightened. She knew what new ground meant, land already lived on, sacred to others. If she went, she became part of it. If she refused, Whitlock would cast her out, and starvation would be waiting. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she nodded, because there was no other choice. The morning ride was grim. Dust plumed beneath the hooves of dozens of cattle, the sun a merciless eye above. Whitlock rode at the front, shoulders rigid, eyes fixed ahead. Clara kept to the side, scanning the ridges, half hoping to glimpse Tahu among the trees. Her hand brushed the bead at her neck again and again, as though it could anchor her wavering spirit. The ambush came swift. Shots cracked from the hillsides, horses rearing, cattle bawling as they scattered. Riders burst from the brush, bandits hungry for blood and spoils. Chaos erupted. Clara ducked low as bullets hissed past. Whitlock bellowed orders, firing wildly, his men answering with shouts and steel. She was thrown from her saddle, the world spinning as she hit the ground hard. Dust choked her lungs. A figure loomed, rifle raised, but before the shot came, an arrow whistled past her ear and struck the raider clean through the chest. Clara looked up to see Tahu at the ridge, bow drawn, face fierce as stormlight. Relief surged through her like fire. She scrambled to her feet, revolver in hand. The fight raged around her, gunfire, screaming cattle, the metallic tang of blood thick in the air. She fired until her hands shook, each shot a prayer not for survival, but for choice, for the strength to decide where she stood. When the dust cleared, half the men lay dead or wounded. The cattle were scattered beyond reach. Whitlock raged, cursing the fallen as if their weakness were betrayal. His eyes landed on Clara, and in them burned a hatred hotter than fire. He saw not a widow clinging to survival, but a witness. A woman who had fought alongside someone he despised, someone who threatened his power. "Traitor," he spat. "You brought this on us." Clara held his gaze, heart pounding. For the first time, she did not lower her eyes. That night, the ranch burned. Flames clawed at the sky, fed by oil and fury. Whether the bandits had returned or whether the fire came from Whitlock's own madness, Clara never knew. But as the inferno spread, she found herself face to face with the man himself in the collapsing hall of his house. His shadow flickered against the firelight, his revolver gleaming. "I took you in," he snarled. "Fed you. And this is how you repay me? Standing with savages? You're nothing, girl. Nothing without my name to keep you alive." Smoke stung her eyes. Heat blistered her skin, but Clara stood tall. "I was nothing when I came here. But I am not nothing now." He lunged, gun rising. She grappled with him, the revolver knocked from his hand, the two of them crashing against the burning beams. His strength was greater, his rage unyielding, but Clara fought with every memory of loss, every humiliation endured, every moment of fear that had nearly broken her. Fire roared around them, devouring the house. At last, with a surge born of desperation, she shoved him back into the flames. His scream was swallowed by the blaze. The roof gave way. Clara stumbled into the night, coughing, her skin singed, her spirit blazing brighter than the fire behind her. The ranch, the empire of cruelty, collapsed into ash. At the tree line, Tahu waited, his silhouette steady against the glow. He offered his hand, not as rescuer, but as equal. Clara took it. They did not speak as they walked away from the ruin. Words were too fragile for what had passed between them. They were not lovers, nor bound by promise. They were survivors, carved by hardship, tempered by fire. Allies in a world that asked everything and gave nothing freely. By dawn, the smoke was a distant smear on the horizon. Clara paused on her eyes, looking back one last time. She felt no triumph, only a solemn weight. Whitlock was gone, but so was the place where she had clawed back her will to live. She would carry the scars as surely as she carried the bead around her neck. She turned toward the open land, endless and unforgiving, yet brimming with the possibility of something unclaimed. Tahu walked beside her, silent, steady. For the first time, she felt not like a widow adrift, but like a woman who had chosen her path. The land was still cruel, the world still uncertain. But she had endured. She had fought. She had lived. And in the echo of that fire, she knew she always would. If Clara's journey moved you, if her defiance and survival spoke to something deep within, then join us in keeping her story alive. Like, share, and subscribe for more tales of grit, struggle, and the human spirit's unbreakable fire.